Ladies and gents, welcome back. Today joining me is a documentary filmmaker of a new film that's come out, and it's on YouTube. It's been having a bit of a wake behind its release, and well, we're going to get into that, but I'll show you a small clip of the film Canada is Dying.
It's a terrifying trend taking place across the country, and it's killing an average of 17 Canadians a day.
People who have drug addictions, they have mental health issues that are unchecked, those are the ones that are causing real concern. Those are the ones where we see these sporadic incidents of violence.
Through this exemption, we will be able to reduce the stigma.
We're having good conversations with British Columbia about something they want to do there.
But they're specifically calling for decriminalizing drugs.
Yes, they are.
This is the first day, and I'm gonna buy some cocaine. I don't even know, I haven't even really looked at the menus.
What we're doing now is almost capital punishment in our streets by neglect.
Other citizens have rights as well.
Aaron Gunn, welcome to the chat. Thank you so much for joining me today. What an amazing film that you put together. I've watched it actually several times now, and I've been encouraging so many others to go out and share it and get it out there because there's so much information about what's going on here in Canada with this whole crisis. Now, before we get into everything about the film, I understand you had some trouble on YouTube with this film. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, lots of trouble navigating the maze that is YouTube, the minefield that is YouTube. Firstly, we put out the trailer, which I think you just showed a clip of. That was within 2 hours, had about 50,000 views, and then was immediately demonetized and age gated. So placed an age restriction on it where people that didn't have a YouTube account could no longer watch it, and it was YouTube basically stopped its distribution to people's channels, and that killed the views immediately from 20,000 an hour or so to a couple dozen an hour. So that happened with the trailer, and the video, the actual documentary itself, was demonetized right out of the gate, which I'm sure hurt its distribution and reach as well as the ability for me to recoup the cost that went into producing it. And then just earlier today, the video was age gated, which will essentially kill its reach going forward. Fortunately, I guess, if you want to look at it glass half full, that happened about 2.5 weeks after we released it. But it has not been a smooth ride with YouTube. Despite this, it still has over 1.2 million views. So we were able to get the message out, but it's been a very frustrating process with them.
Right. And while many content creators know just the frustrations that go behind that, but if you have a long film such as this, I'm encouraging everybody, share the film. The link is in the description down below. Get it out there, because now with AgeGate, we have to distribute it, or else it'll be just sitting there. Anyway, I wanted to get into what is it as a documentary filmmaker because you could have made a documentary film about anything that wouldn't get age gated, you wouldn't be dealing with all these problems. Why did you decide to take on this big bite of getting into the subject matter that's in the film?
Well, I think this is a sequel, I should mention, first of all, to another film called Vancouver is Dying. But the reason I tackled this topic in general was growing up in coastal British Columbia. Over the past 20-25 years, the situation with regard to homelessness, drug addiction, open drug use, and violent crime have been getting worse, significantly worse to anybody who's got two eyes on their head and walking around in any of these cities. And yet all we heard from the politicians and the media was we simply had to double down. We had to double down on this policy of so-called harm reduction. It was the only way to solve the crisis. I should also mention, I listed all those problems. The overdose deaths themselves have exploded and increased by more than 1,000% as well. So I looked at this problem and said, something's not adding up here. Clearly what we're doing is not working. If this is success, I don't know what failure looks like. Parts of the downtowns of cities like Vancouver, for example, have turned into like these apocalyptic, dystopian alternate realities. And I wanted to pull the curtain back and investigate the issue further and possibly suggest that what we're doing isn't actually working and we should be trying something else. And as it pertains to Canada's dying, the reason I made that is after Vancouver's dying, people reached out from across the country and said, you have to come to my city too. This isn't just happening in Vancouver. Come to Victoria, come to London, come to Calgary, come to Edmonton, and see the same thing is happening here. So it became quite evident to me that there were certain problems and certain aspects of this challenge that were, weren't just confined to the downtown east side in Vancouver, but in fact had reached most corners of the country.
Well, I'm hearing about it all the time when I do videos talking about this. I hear about it in the comments. People saying, "Come to Sudbury, come to all these other places and rural places that didn't typically have these kinds of issues." And it's happening. It's exploding all over the place. Now, it does seem to be a two-tier problem, and I think you laid it out very well in the documentary. The first half of the documentary is talking about the issue with crime and the issue that these criminals, they're breaking the law, but then they're not being put away for the laws that they've broken. They're out there on bail immediately, sometimes several times a day, breaking the law and being released again by the police and the judicial system that is supposed to be holding these people. And then next, you get into what's actually causing it, what the root issue for a lot of these people that are caught in this whole cycle of poverty and addiction and crime, which is the whole drug problem. What made you what made you bring this whole thing together in one neat, tiny, tight package? Because like a lot of people have been trying to figure out the issue with both the crime problem and the opioid crisis, but not everybody is bringing this together in one cohesive package.
Well, I think when I was making Vancouver's Dying, what happened organically through the course of the interviews was just how much these issues were all connected to the addictions crisis, the rampant and uncontrolled drug use that we have happening in this province, and to a lesser extent across the country, and how they were all connected. I mean, we talked to addicts in recovery who were living on the streets as recently as 2 years ago, who said repeatedly that their addiction costs them $200 a day, $300 a day. And they basically had to go out and commit crimes in order to fund that addiction. And we talked to police officers who said they see the same people committing crimes over and over again. As soon as they get arrested, they're out the exact same day. No one's going to be kept in jail. So it was this revolving door that was being fueled by a drug addiction. And then you had the violent crime that the police officers we spoke with, they've never seen anything like it. And that was being fueled by more and more people becoming desperate drug addicts, mixing with mental illness or setting off mental illness, going into drug-induced psychosis, these kinds of things, stabbing people on Sky trains, stabbing people at the subway in Toronto, for example, or the mother and her child in Edmonton, these random violent attacks. And it became quite obvious to me that everything was all tied together. Obviously, homelessness is a huge part of this. If you get a $300 a day drug addiction, I mean, you're probably not employable, and you certainly don't have any money to pay for rent, so you're going to end up on the streets. And so it just became obvious that the homelessness was directly connected to the drug use. A lot of the mental illness was directly connected to the drug use. Almost all of the petty theft was directly connected to the drug use. And a lot of the violent crime and violent attacks was created by the chaos created by the drug use. And yet we didn't hear any of this from the media, right? This was not, we had to destigmatize everything. Homelessness was just because, homes were too expensive. That's actually what the real reason was. And so I really wanted, once it became evident to me what was happening, I really wanted to connect those dots to people, because once you see that this rampant drug addiction is causing all these problems, I think it becomes obvious that handing out more drugs and destigmatizing drug use is not the solution, which is the path that BC has been taking for the past 20 years.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about next. This whole safe supply. It's kind of a bleeding heart, thought process behind a lot of this. It's the idea of, well, they're suffering, or somebody's a criminal. Don't throw them in jail. Jail's not just going to make them a hardened criminal. This is what leads to bail reforms that allow people to go back out on the street, and the safe supply. Now, what's the this is what I'm really curious about, and that's the cost to society. And one thing is the cost to the taxpayer. If the government's gonna be paying for these illicit drugs for people to be using out on the streets, there must be some sort of cost that it's costing us. And if it's not solving the problem, then it just becomes a cost to society writ large. But I don't know if this is something that you touched on. Is there a direct cost to the taxpayer to actually fund these programs?
Well, of course, the safe supply clinics have an operating cost. The drugs themselves obviously have a cost that is going to pharmaceutical companies, and the pharmacies get paid a very very healthy and incentivizing daily dispense fee, because all these prescriptions are daily dispenses. So these add up to the hundreds of millions of dollars, probably in the billions of dollars for sure. The federal government just announced new funding for this. A lot of this is being pushed by Ottawa, as opposed, sometimes the provinces don't even know it's happening, as was the case in Alberta recently. So there's a huge cost to taxpayers, but the bigger cost is the fact that these policies, these so-called safe supply drugs, are being diverted and to people in high schools, in colleges, in universities, and creating the next generation of opioid addicts. And an opioid addict can no longer contribute to society. They're no longer taxpayers, most likely. They likely get involved in crime. They likely take up billions of dollars in healthcare services and policing costs and things like that, and all sorts of other externalities. So there is a direct cost of funding these safe supply programs, but the biggest cost to society is the fact that we are normalizing, enabling, and to an extent, well, quite directly, creating even more opioid addicts in our society. And that has a massive carrying cost for everybody else. And it's also, I walk these streets, I walk the downtown east side. This is not the compassionate solution. I mean, you've got people that are literally barely alive in the most, real sense of that word. And these are not people that can care for themselves. This is not a humane solution. And just to look at these people who are struggling to even walk and look after themselves on the street and think, oh, the solution is to give them more drugs, more of the exact same drugs that caused this problem in the first place. I think it's so devoid of common sense. It doesn't even matter. It's devoid of common sense. It's also, look at the evidence. We've been running this experiment for 20 years, and I don't know how it could have gone any more badly. So it's a huge cost, and we're all paying for it. And every day you try to go to the ER and see what your wait time is, because how many beds are being taken up by people that just finished overdosing for the 15th or 20th time, or are taking up all the ambulances and paramedic workers and all these other things. So there's a huge cost to society.
Well, the good thing about your documentary is it doesn't just give complaints. It does show that we do have a way out of this, and that the people who are suffering from these addictions do have a way out. And I'm not going to spoil the documentary, because you can click the link down in the description down below and you can watch the whole thing. But there is a way out for these people, and you showcase some people who have actually full recovered and are now active in the recovery of other addicts and in Alberta, and doing a great job over there with a different sort of set of policies. So I'd love to have you come back in and have longer conversations about this. Aaron Gunn, I want to thank you again for joining me and for making this documentary, because this is a really important message to get out to Canadians. I'm aware now that you have some other things down the pipe. Can you let us know a bit about that?
Yeah, well, Canada is Dying is part of a series I do called Politics Explained, and it was the first episode of the 4th season. There are 5 more episodes coming. Will probably be announced in the next couple days, like the release dates and the topics. And those are going to be starting to be released in early July. So there's 5 more episodes coming on things like free speech and healthcare and equalization. So looking forward to getting those out and getting people's feedback and trying to raise awareness about a lot of issues, because Of course, a big problem is, and you're obviously doing great work on your channel, but so many Canadians don't have access to the information that they need. So hopefully providing another perspective, another voice can help bring about a more balanced political conversation in this country.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron Gunn. We're looking forward to seeing more from you.
Thank you for having me.